Thank you. So we're going to, thank you everyone. We're going to go through the audience, and you may ask any questions you want. I'll repeat them so I can make sure I understand what you're asking.
Yeah, I have a question, and it has to do with carriage fees that you mentioned, Greg. And also a little plug for the Wireless Forum. We've been around 14 years. Back about 9, 10 years ago, we used to have this thing called IPTV Special Interest Group. At that time, one of the things that was talked about is this huge media disruption, media value chain disruption. I've heard that today too. But I look at my Comcast bill, it's gone up because of the sports franchising fees of MLB, NFL, NBA, and all that. The question is, how will the entry of Amazon, Twitter, Snapchat, rest of them, be truly disruptive to bring those fees down, and when? So
I'm going to simplify the question. How OTT and all the new players are changing the landscape in either revenues, advertising, or even on carriage fees. Hey, let's start with Greg.
So to answer your question, scale needs to continue to grow because the rights holder will need the eyeballs to monetize, which then justifies their check that they're writing to the rights holder. And you know, I think some of the watershed deals, you know, the NFL deal, the NBA deal, were the NCAA deal, were, you know, really isolated one player in each of those deals because they were at such a high level that there wasn't really any negotiating. You know, one player stepped up for each of those and signed the big check. Which then in essence was passed down to the consumer through increased carriage fees. And I think what we're starting to see, you know, from whether it's some of the OTT new opportunities that are out there about just being able to a la carte, I want this channel, that channel, that channel. And, you know, Dish is doing it, DirecTV is doing it, and I think soon enough we're going to see the big cable companies start to do that as well. But I think ultimately it's going to be when an Amazon or an Apple or any number of different players can justify the expense through being able to pass on and monetize it. And scale will need to continue to grow in order to do that.
James, you're it.
Yeah, so this is a conversation we have almost daily at CNN, right? Because there's a big win if, you know, to be very honest, is if we get you out of your Comcast bill, right? Because if we can get you onto CNN Go, now I have the ability to do targeted advertising, et cetera, because linear advertising still to this day, there's not really any really great ways to attribute if that worked or not, right? But with real smart, targeted advertising that we can do because we know that you're on your Roku, your Apple TV device, there's a big play for us to do that, right? So I think that the movement is happening. So I may get shot for saying this, but like I do think that you're seeing it already in today's world where people want just the particular channels that they want. You're seeing companies like Sling being very successful right now because the $20 entry package, there was a real smart reason why Turner wanted to be a part of that package because of that. They were like, we'll take a little bit less in order for them to have Cartoon Network, TBS, TNT, and CNN. Like, boom, we'll get you all. And so I do think that it's dramatically changing already, and it's happening right in front of us.
In order for all this, you need the infrastructure. You need the connectivity. And so the cable wars of the 90s and early 2000s are now turning into the Wi-Fi wars, right? And so you're seeing, you know, these companies diversify themselves, and you know, Comcast and Cox and you know, AT&T, and they focus more on you know, the pipe and being able to activate, you know, all the things that CNN Go is providing.
So let me rephrase. what is the difference in CPM between traditional broadcast and mobile or OTT?
Our experience is that OTT is higher. It's highly in demand. Even what we think of as remnant on OTT, meaning not direct sold, not particularly premium, not forward buying us, but rather just tapping into an ad network, is kind of premium remnant, if you will. We see a lot of promise there. We also see that there's sometimes a discussion about, is OTT accretive or competitive? And our position at NewsOn, I mean, we're a free, ad-supported, unauthenticated app, which is different than some others out there, right? And so you got to think about each of these plays in different ways. In our case, what we're finding is that a lot of people have cut the cord. They've said, we don't want fill-in-the-blank package, but then they're missing local news, and so they're either not connected with their communities enough, or they're getting it from someplace that's not professionally produced news, even if they want it. And so what we're trying to do is provide that alternative, and the advertisers love that. So we're actually quite happy with our progress so far, even though it's still early.
So 5G, who wants to take it?
That's a good question. So the U.S. ranks number 28 in the whole universe in mobile internet speed. Countries like Germany, UK are all ahead of the U.S. One of the reasons why you haven't seen things like AR and live TV proliferate to the way it is because 5G isn't going to come out until, I don't know, maybe 2019 or whatever. But countries like Japan, Apple, Google, they're all doing beta tests right now to figure out the consumption patterns of 5G. In my opinion, I think 5G is really going to serve AR technology very well. I went to this conference by Nir Eyal. He wrote this book called Hooked, Building Habit-Forming Products. And the reason why AR hasn't really taken off is because everything AR right now is kind of a novelty. And novelty doesn't have sustainable value for users, as you can see in the Pokemon Go phase. And so there are apps out there right now, like Google Translate, that are very useful. You go to a different country, you put your phone up to it, and it translates the language for you. There's this app called Inkwell. I don't know if you've heard of it, but to not make a regretful decision for the rest of your life, it's pretty much getting a tattoo design and putting it on your body to see if you actually like it or not, which can be useful for a lot of people. But in my opinion, that's where AR and VR and all that stuff that you hear about is really going to take advantage of the 5G ecosystem.
I have a question related to AR, VR. We talked a little bit about what's the future, but we haven't said what is the next big thing. Do you believe that 4K, AR, VR in the mobile environment are the next big things? And how are you going to go and make it happen in your respective companies?
I just went to Google I/O, which is the annual Google conference, and all they were talking about was AI. 3 years ago, all they were talking about was mobile, and now they've pretty much become an AI-first company. And it pretty much, so data capture is pretty simple. It's interpreting the data and figuring out what to do with it, which is like the hardest, most complex problem to solve. For the Weather Channel, we do 36 billion API calls per day. And so part of that challenge is figuring out what those segments are and figuring out how do we serve those users the right experience. With all that AI and with all that data comes VDAs, so voice digital assistants, so things like Alexa and IoT, connecting your Google Home with your TV. The voice is going to become the new keyboard. And so there's been a lot of investments on the Facebook, Google, Amazon side, and that sort of technology. And as they tell us, if Amazon, Google, and Facebook sneezes, we all catch a cold. We're essentially going to have to adapt to those trailblazers and all the different products that they come up with.
Yeah, so I'll start off with that. So they're an interesting partner, right? So they're a lot of fun to have a conversation with. They really are. And one of the things that is a challenge with them is that they have an insanely high engagement, right? People are without a doubt addicted to the F, right? So they gotta have like this juice every day when it comes to it all. But they also have a big challenge when it comes to like Facebook News, right? And that is that no, we are not the #1 source of fake news in the world, contrary to popular belief. I made my own fake news joke, and that is it's actually Facebook, right? So, and it's a challenge that we have today, is because it's really, really hard. We do a lot. Most people may or may not notice that we do a lot when it comes to when people post and share CNN links, that we comply very strongly to Facebook protocol to make sure that it really does show up as a CNN legit link, so that way it's not, we don't get confused with the Onion, right? It is a challenge, right, on a day-to-day basis. And so we have to get to the point where, and we are in a lot of talks with them, is to sit there and say, okay, how can we work together on it? But it's a problem, honestly, that they have to fix first. We don't, it's kind of weird. We don't really need them, and it's a weird, interesting situation right now. But we've got to get to the point where they have a way of solving that, and they've done a lot of pilot programs of how to highlight it. Like, you know, if you share an Onion link, it like makes sure that if you've never seen it before, it shows up a little pop-up that says, by the way, you're reading something that is fake, right? Please don't take this seriously. So, but it's a little bit of a challenge. So.
Yeah. So like I said before, it's all about figuring out who you are as a user. So if you take the Weather Channel app, for instance, if you're somebody that goes to Maps 3 times a week, we're going to cater to your personal profile of what the Weather Channel app experience is going to be. Before, we were one-to-one. You know, everyone, you know, people in Los Angeles got videos of floods in New York. People in Florida got videos of, you know, weather events in Detroit. And so, I mean, James and I, we've got a big challenge up ahead of us. I mean, all of us do. And it's the next phase of data interpretation.
Great.
You know, again, we talked earlier about the differentiation between live and non-live. So on the live side, you know, really the customization from the actual feed can be perspective, so where I'm viewing the game. And, you know, we've talked a little bit about AR, but I think that's the next step for personalization, especially as it relates to a live experience. It all ties back to data, but in this instance, data happening from the game itself. Major League Baseball has made some great advancements with their StatCast product. So StatCast is an advanced level of statistics that's measuring things that are happening on the field that go a little bit deeper than balls and strikes, but are also a lot more accessible than some of the really deep inside baseball statistics. So range covered. So how many feet did Ender Inciarte cover when he tracked down that fly ball? Speed, how fast and what was the max speed of Dansby Swanson on that double that he just hit? And being able to augment those types of visualizations over a play after it happens, that is a high level of customization. If there are certain players or certain plays that interest you more so than others, those are the types of elements that we could layer on to a live event. And on the non-live side, I think there's huge opportunity there as it relates to who's your favorite player and tying it to other elements like your fantasy team and really serving that up specifically. But that's already being done in you know significant sense. I really think that the next big leap for live is AR.
Big round of applause for our panel, our great panel tonight. You guys, very insightful. You know, the market's moving so fast, the industry's moving so fast. You guys are on top of it. You're coming from different perspective. So thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us. Very much appreciated. So we're going to